Feeling pretty smug with success of your harvesting this season and its reduction on your carbon footprint? I was, but it didn't last long. Never done this before. I looked up my carbon footprint on a calculator and the one I selected was on the WWF website. Answering all the questions in the questionnaire, I came up with a footprint of 85%, which is 8.6 tonnes, and the world average is only 5 tonnes. First question, 85% of what? And my food average is 22% of my 85% average. This is depressing. I'll have to get back onto doing my weekly diary. Hi, welcome to my allotment in East Sussex. This will be my diary for the third week in November 2019. It's not rained much in the past weeks. In fact, Sunday was warm and bright and I fixed the replacement fence panel I made last week. Tuesday was our first hard frost of the summer and not much was carried out on the allotment except for general tidying up. The task, which I always plan to do this time of year and as usual failed, is sow next year's broad beans about the 5th of November, and again, as usual, I sowed them this week. While I sow these beans, let's go back to the carbon footprint. The WWF app did not allow me to input the actual percentage of homegrown to be bought, which they assessed as 20%, but last season my percentage was 40%. Furthermore, I was penalised for digging, using cow manure, chemical fertilisers, growing tomatoes in a heated greenhouse, and finally a huge penalty for using mains water in large quantities to water my plot. Their advice to me was eat in season, eat less meat and dairy, and add some variety. Back to the plot. You may have noticed last week my autumn sown onion sets have all sprouted and preparation is required for planting them out on the plot. Bed 6 has been selected and you may recall this bed had a layer of horse manure laid on which I had set my potato pots. To warm this bed up, I've covered the bed with black wheat fabric and with the intention of bedding them sometime next week, weather dependent. Again, you may have noticed the autumn sown peas were not doing so very well, which I put down to forgetting to soak them overnight. Therefore, I decided to re-sow these, and of course soak the peas. Minimum 40 peas in a glass, topped with water, left overnight, drained and bagged, into the car, off to the plot. Where's that cat when you need him? It's now a job for replacing these peas. The mice have discovered the cat has gone. Wheedling out the defunct peas with a screwdriver, the soaked peas were dropped into the holes and covered with a layer of compost. Press firm and then labelled. Due to the frost earlier in the week, I considered it prudent to purchase a paraffin heater, which arrived and was unboxed on Friday. Taken to site, the heater was taken apart, filled with paraffin, the wick soaked, and then placed in the wick cap. The heater is placed in the centre of the floor and lit. The flame on the shot looks more intense than actually it is due to failing light in the poly and the camera lens, and the minimum temperature overnight was recorded as 8.3 centigrade with a maximum of 15.3 centigrade. Okay, there's two things I need to talk about before I wind up today. One is it's raining outside, which makes today a training day, and what I want to talk about here is the A roll and the B roll. Until I started working with David on the Filmora, I hadn't a clue what an A roll and a B roll are. To me, the A roll was what we used on a Sunday or when the Queen was coming round, and the B roll is what we generally use during the week. But having said that, what I've found out is that in my filming for videos, I've always been doing the B roll. I didn't know that, but apparently what I've been doing a B roll, and I haven't been doing an A roll, and I've been trying to work the function of an A roll into the B roll, and apparently that's not the way to do it. So what I'm doing now is shooting the A roll. Okay, so I've got that out of the way. Now, A roll, I mentioned earlier about my carbon footprint and how I was dissatisfied and that I was being penalised. Well, my daughter, she works at this Sussex University, and I thought, well, I'd better get her help, because apparently in August they issued publicly with Brighton Council that there is a climate emergency, because Brighton is a green held constituency, so they will go for things such as the green. And digging into it, what we've got with the World Life WWF app is that it's just generic, and that the penalising of garden is that gardeners use manure, and we know apparently the effect that has on it's produced by beef cattle, and it's part of the meat production, and the beasts themselves put CO2 or methane into the atmosphere. So that's fairly easy to understand. I only used a small amount of horse manure last year, which I put onto bed 7, if you remember, which is now going to be the onions the next season. Next thing that went on is about tomatoes, growing them in a greenhouse. And they explained that a greenhouse is one of the most inefficient ways of growing food. It still has a lower carbon footprint by growing your tomatoes in, say, Spain and shipping them here than it does in growing them in these great big long heated greenhouses which aren't double glazed, etc. So they take it that a gardener does a greenhouse for tomatoes, which I don't do. I did when I lived in the north, because the only way I could grow tomatoes was in the greenhouse, even though we had a southeast facing plot, but we got the wind in from Emily Moor. Our house was positioned at what's known as Oxford Top, very high up in the high parts of that part of Bradford, and there's no way you could grow them outside in the garden. They also go on about and penalise the gardeners for digging, because particularly ploughing, deep ploughing, which is fairly recent. Talking to the local farmers, before the war it was a much shallower ploughing that they did then, but now the ploughs plough deeper, bigger tractors, bigger ploughs, and that has a bad effect. Also, in certain countries, in particular states, they don't rotate, they have monoculture, I think it's called. That doesn't affect us. But of course, I don't dig. I do no dig, and they're not quite certain what no dig is. So we've got work to do there. But the biggest penalising that I got was using water. Our plot, and we have mains water for our water. Apparently, that the carbon footprint on producing mains water is very high, and it has a detrimental effect when you use it on the plot. And what they're saying is that the gardeners should just use rainwater and collect rainwater, which we find difficult on our plot, because being part of the electricity board, we're not allowed to put structures up, so we've got to talk to that. So that bit there on there. So what I want to say now is I hope you've enjoyed the video. Ring the bell, and if you've not already subscribed, please subscribe. But what I'd like is some comments, and I'm sure there should be some good comments this week. There certainly was last week. And Babette, hi Babette, that was brilliant, that on the Jack Reacher coming out and posting. I live in San Diego. When my wife saw that on her laptop, because she gets a copy of what gets sent to me, she burst out, hey, so that was good. And also I'd like to mention Wayne's allotment. We've had quite a big discussion on the use of recorders. So there we go. That's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. And for now, bye.